Good evening, everyone, and welcome to OTF Connects on this beautiful March the 23rd. My name is Susan Watt, and I'll be your moderator for this evening. So I will be in the background looking after putting some links into the chat and managing any issues that we may have. And the first thing I'd really like to do is introduce Kathy Griffin, who is our facilitator tonight, and she's going to treat us to a presentation about math. Where do I begin? Part 2, assessment. And this is a follow-up to a session that she did, I believe, a few weeks ago. Give us a red check mark if you attended Kathy's session part 1, which was a few weeks ago with OTF Connects. Okay, so I see, I think 1, 2, a couple of check marks. Good. So anyway, Kathy, I'm going to turn things over to you and let you continue. I will put it ahead to your next slide, and then I'll let you begin. So welcome, Kathy, and welcome, everyone.
Thank you very much, Susan. I am at the moment a learning resource teacher, and I've come out of the junior kind of levels of teaching more recently, but I've also taught junior and intermediate as well. Today's session I'm going to focus on junior math, but it is very applicable to other grades, and you're going to see at least one other teacher in some of the video clips that is a grade 8 teacher. So my history is I've taught all over the place, including New Zealand, but the last sort of 7 years I've been back in this area, and especially for the last 5 years I've been working on math inquiries, first as a participant and then as a facilitator. And gradually the group of people I've worked with, I've been at the same school all this time. We've moved along in our understanding of math and math assessment, as well as planning and the rest of the shebang. So the first session I did about a month ago focused on the planning aspect, and in a moment I'll go over sort of some of the points where I'm kind of taking off from, but if you have any questions about any part of it, you feel free to ask. So what I was hoping to do to start with is just find out where you all are in terms of your teaching. So if you want to grab an icon, and then just add, a symbol somewhere, and we'll just see how many junior teachers we have, and if there's anybody else that falls without that. And while you're waiting, if you finish that, if you want to, at any point in the next few slides, just put in what you're hoping to get out of this session in the chat. That would be great, and you can do that at any point if you don't want to use the microphone. And just let me know if you have a question or something maybe I can come back to, or I can say, I'll get to that in a moment. Just hold on, and we'll try and make sure you get everything you need. So we've got quite a few juniors, somebody straddling junior, intermediate, and a few splits and 7/8. That's great. So hopefully we've got most people on there, 3, 4 over on the side. Great. Variety of ways of showing where you are. So I'm going to be asking you in the next couple slides about, the next one is how long you've been teaching, and it's going to be a continuum. Nice to see some people on the OT list. That's great. So the next question kind of links into that. How long have you been teaching? For me, I kind of consider, even though maybe I don't want to, that I'm now sort of on a long time getting there. Not quite to retirement, but I've been teaching for a while. But are you a beginner teacher, midway point through your career? Where are you that way? I love seeing the comments come up in the chat. So thank you, Ashley. You've never taught math before. That's great. RV, what's your last name, please? Oh, I see, okay. So we have quite a range, some beginners, midway, all the way along, great. So the next few questions have to do with assessment in terms of this assessment triangle. There's quite a few documents that refer to assessment as a triangulation between product, observation, and conversation. And I'm just wondering how familiar people are with this triangulation. So would you be able to let me know, just with a symbol, and I'm gonna pick one here, where you are in terms of your confidence in the products you're collecting in terms of them, you know, I know, especially at the beginning of my career, I kind of used some tests that were produced for me, and my confidence maybe in those products wasn't as high as it is now in terms of knowing I'm reaching the curriculum, I'm assessing what I've taught, that sort of thing. So I might have a very high confidence in my product that I'm assessing, but how do I feel about where I am on the scale of triangulation? So maybe I'm up here at the very top. Oh, and I've lost my little symbol. Maybe I'm up at the very top. Nope, I can't seem to mark on there. But you might be at the very top of using all three: observation, conversation, and product when you're assessing students and reporting on their learning. Or you might be you know, confident in your products, but not so confident that you're getting a balance of assessment. So if everybody's able to add some sort of symbol on there, that would be fabulous. And again, if you have any specific questions of things that you want to get out of this session, and you can put those in that chat, it helps me target what I'm talking about. But feel free to add those at any point. Just if you know you came with a certain certain question in mind, do put that in. So Susan, I don't know, adding the emoticon, are you able to just come on and talk through that? Because I seem to have trouble too placing clip art on the page.
Yep, I can do that. So the toolbar is down here to the left of your content area, and at the very bottom of your toolbar, I'm pointing at it on mine. I don't know if I'm pointing at it on yours, but it's the very bottom of your toolbar is the clip art tool. And if you click on that and then choose the common symbols, just choose one and click it wherever you want on the page. Did that help?
Yep, that's great. And I just discovered my pointer. I've got a little. Can everybody see? Susan, can you see my pointer?
No, I can't. So what you have to do is make sure you hold it when you move it in order to show it.
Now?
Click and hold and drag it around on the screen.
Yeah, I'm doing that. Can you see it?
Okay. No, so I'm doing that with my pointer finger. There you go. That's it.
Okay. All right.
Now you got it.
Okay, good. So meanwhile, you guys have all finished the activity. So we've got arrange again, and that helps me sort of figure out where people are in that understanding and confidence. So it seems like I've picked a good subject, which is great. So in terms of observation, do you think, here's a question that a lot of the teachers have had at my school is, you know, we feel we're doing a lot of observation maybe, so maybe we're up here, but our documentation of that observation might be on the low end, or we feel we are observing a lot of good things and we're doing sufficient observation. Like if you think of that triangle that you're doing equal amounts of collecting documentation on what the students are talking about, what they're doing, and the products they produce. And that would be my question. Where would you put yourself on this? Okay, so Lisa said, what are we indicating on the graph? So you're kind of trying to, on the three graphs, this is the second one here, just let me know how confident you feel in knowing what you're observing when you're observing students in math, and whether you feel you're doing sufficient documentation. So trying to find where you are on that graph. What we're talking about is a triangulation of assessment between trying to strike a balance as a teacher in collecting information about students' understanding of math through products they create, through observation of what they're doing, and through their conversation. Okay? So the final one here is about conversation. Do you feel you're spending much time listening to students' conversation? And how confident that are you in the kind of information you're getting from the conversation between students? So you might be over at the low end for both if you really haven't started collecting any data about students' understanding of math from the conversation. And I certainly know when I started teaching math, I went to a school where I was given a math binder for grade 5, and there were handouts for the whole year, and I just went from one handout to the other, and that was the way it was done at that school. And there really wasn't much emphasis on encouraging students to talk about the math. There was some, but that wasn't a focus. And I really wasn't collecting any data about conversations. So that's something that has changed in my practice over the last 10 years or so. Okay, that gives me an idea of where we are. The last sort of information thing I want to know is where do you start? Do you have any ideas if you could use your little writing tool, there's an A with lines on it, to click on the page and just give me an idea of if you're assessing math, where do you get assessments? Do you make them up yourself? You can also enter this in the chat box if you'd rather do that. Where do you start with your assessments? Are you using a textbook and using the tests that come with those? Are you creating them yourself? Are there any other way that you are somebody's drawing? There is a text box there too if you'd rather use that. If you can find the one with the A on it, then you can click on and then just text. Just write. So using diagnostics, is leaps and bounds, is that I don't know if that's an actual name of a tool. I haven't heard about that one before. So math interviews and surveys, achievement charts, open-ended questions, text, conversations, observations, good, guide to effective instructions. Nelson, thank you, Anik. Yeah, so if you're working as an OT, you may have observed some people using assessments, and maybe you can add something that you've seen someone else use. That's fine. Oh, leaps and bounds is Marion Small. Okay, all right, thank you. Good. Okay, so that gives me an idea of the kind of resources that you're used to. Mix of textbook, online resources, print resources, tips. I think teachers are very resourceful in finding things when they want them. Okay, so that gives me a handle on that. If you want to just use your vote button, excuse me, with the red X for no and the green check for yes, how many of you are doing most of these? Sorry, I kind of already answered that, but just to check if you feel like most of the assessment you're doing, if you're doing it yourself, or most of the assessment you've seen is paper and pencil assessment. Just give a check on that if you can for me. Okay. And while you're doing that, I'm going to go to the next one. Okay, yeah. And basically, I'm going to go over my intentions with this webinar. I definitely want to talk about how the curriculum and understanding of the continuum of concepts in the curriculum are really basic starting point for being able to assess really well. Making a classroom that's authentic, real problems, that sort of thing, safe for the kids to participate, having a lot of dialogue, and including your students as co-researchers and including a lot of student voice in what you're doing. Those are some basic things that I think are really important in your programming and in assessment as well. We're going to touch on sort of what you're going to see in the video clips. I'm hoping you'll see that the group that I'm working with, we're really working on being reflective practitioners and doing transparent action research with our students. So showing our students how we are trying to improve our practice, okay? And I'll come back to this slide at the end to see if I've managed to do this. I'm assuming that you're coming to this session with an understanding of the curriculum and the developmental continuum, because I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on that. But if you want to see my webinar part 1, you can go back and get that in the archive from a month ago. And it talks more about how to plan using the developmental continuum. I'm hoping to show you a diversity of strategies and range of manipulatives that kids can use in solving rich problems. I'm assuming that you're coming to this with an understanding of a 3-part lesson, but you don't have to. We're just jumping right in with looking at the kids solving a problem. We're not going to be dealing with the minds-on or the consolidation piece in this session. And my assumption also is that within what I'm doing, there is a rich element of metacognition, and that the kids are involved in constructing their own understanding of the math that we're doing. So it's a kind of a constructivist viewpoint or approach to learning. Okay, so I'm going to be trying through this session to sort of make transparent the journey I'm on with the people that I'm facilitating. And some of what I'm going to be doing is sort of laying bare my teaching, because I was the one holding the video camera and working with the kids. I was the one that got videotaped that you're going to see a little bit of. And I'm an imperfect teacher, just like everybody, and struggling to improve my teaching alongside the people I'm working with. And I've been out of the classroom. I'm a learning resource teacher, so I've been out of the classroom a couple of years. So it was an amazing opportunity just before March break to jump into the classroom of one of my colleagues and really interact with the students in a way I haven't done for a few years in that context. So we're going to start where I started about 4 years ago with the people I've been working with at my school. We started creating basically a rubric to use in marking rich problems. We started off with lesson study and developing some rich problems for our students to do, because we wanted them to be doing, having the opportunity to really struggle with some problems and to work on a conceptual understanding. So we came up with this rubric, and I just want you to take a look at it for a minute, because we're going to take a look at some curriculum, and we're going to come back to this at the end, and you can have access to this document at the end of the session. All the information will be put up on the OTF website. But one thing for, thank you for the link, Susan. So when we're looking at assessing student work, we have to have an idea of the levels at which we're going to assess. And I think this gave our staff a touchstone to keep coming back to, and a place to start when moderating student work. Can you show me, I'm just going to clear the tick marks. How many of you have ever participated in moderating student work? So taking a piece of student work like a math, it doesn't have to be math, but maybe you've done math, a math problem, student work problem, and you sat with a colleague or two or more, and you work together to decide what level that is at. Perhaps you co-create a rubric yourselves and mark it together. Getting a variety of answers there. So some of you have had experience. It's a really valuable thing to do, and it's something we started off with 4 or 5 years ago, and we are still doing, because it's so great to get together with a colleague and discuss the math behind it and really make sure that there's some consistency with the way you're marking. It forces us to be more accountable for what we're doing as well. So level 1 would be limited understanding of the math, inaccurate perhaps. And when we're talking about an inappropriate strategy, this comes back to that continuum in the curriculum of understanding. And we're going to take a look in a minute at that, a part of that continuum. You might have, for example, a grade 6 student who's doing multiplication still by drawing all the groups, like 5 groups of 3, and then counting them one by one. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and keep going like that. That would be an inappropriate strategy for a grade 5 student, even if they showed they did the calculations correctly and all the rest. So that could be a level 1 answer for a student. Level 2, we worked together on figuring out what would a level 2 be. And we started using the rubrics from EQAO. And if you haven't ever used a rubric for grading student work, and you've never done any moderation of student work, the EQAO website is a good place to start, because there's all the leveled grade 3 and grade 6 and grade 9 examples, and they give you the rubric there, and you can take a look at a level 1 exemplar and that sort of thing. Also the math exemplar books that go with the curriculum are also good. But we came to our own understanding and wrote this ourselves as a group. And we decided level 2 was a partial understanding. There's evidence of a reasonable strategy, but it's incomplete maybe. It could be that it's an incorrect application of a whole strategy or part of a strategy, but they have some grasp of some of the strategy that is needed in the problem. It could be a below grade level strategy. As I said before, for level 1, maybe it's just a grade below as opposed to 2 or 3 grades below. Perhaps they incorrectly interpreted the question, or their answer is poorly communicated, or there's no reasoning, just an answer. Okay. Level 3, you got a correct answer, and there could be a minor computational error in this, and you could still get a level 3. We decided that would be the way we would go, and that's the way they mark it on EQAO as well. We felt that there was some reflection or explanation needed, so that it was, offering some reasoning, and obviously we could see some communication of math or math vocabulary. And the thinking can be purely numerical. It doesn't have to be, all out in a sentence. It could just be that a person has done a multiplication equation or something like that, and that could count as the thinking, as long as it's clear what there's enough labels to tell what part of the question they're answering. And then level 4, correct, reflection and explanation is complete. Maybe the person's gone above and beyond by giving more than one option, or it could be a really good relation to reality. So somebody who really gets the context of the question and is able to say, it could be, for example, something about the perimeter of a garden. And I've had this before where I give the kids a really unrealistic garden to see if anybody would come up with this. And I told them I lived in town, and some of them gave me the feedback that, you know what, you live in town, there's no way you could have a yard that big. That's like a garden for somebody who's growing crops. So, that's a pretty extreme example, but that kind of thinking, where the person's thinking really, what does the math mean, and what are the implications, and what's the most reasonable answer. It could be that they're doing some thinking beyond their grade level, and we're going to take a look at sort of what that means in the curriculum. And possibly they've picked a strategy that's much more efficient than another. Okay, so we felt that level 4 was pretty. It was a range of ideas there that it could fit a level 4. So, in summary, and sort of in talking about what you need to know to assess students, you need to know the curriculum. This is really important. That's where we're going to start. Is taking a look for the clips that I got. They're all about to do with the same context. It's a measurement in grade 6. So you have to know the curriculum, and not just know the curriculum in your grade, but know the curriculum above and below your grade. And in my last webinar, I went through how to do that sort of curriculum sort to make sure you can see what the strategies are before and after, so you can really assess the students correctly. You also have to know the math, and with that, be open-minded. So that's something that I've really struggled with and developed over the years, is to be able to see that there's more than one option, okay, in the math. If you go into a math problem or something with a mindset that there's only one way to do this and there's a right way, then you're going to miss a lot of the students' thinking, and you're going to miss reinforcing for students their amazing thinking. You're going to see me make this mistake a little bit later about not being open-minded enough. So this is hard. It's hard to do this, especially I find as a teacher who, I guess, went to school with a more traditional background and a more traditional way of being taught, that this is the formula, this is how you do it, sort of thing. And for me, and I know a lot of teachers I work with, it's a real challenge. Okay, so we're going to take a look at the curriculum behind the clips I'm going to show you. Okay, and we're going to go a grade below and a grade above the grade you're going to see. The class that we're going to see is a grade 6 class, but there's 4 grade 5 students in the class. But for the purposes of this webinar, we'll just say it's a grade 6 class. And they were doing a grade 6 activity at this point. So if you take a look at grade 5, the curriculum that's around the kind of problem that we're doing, the grade 5 students are only needing to be able to do the volume of congruent of a rectangular prism, basically, and with manipulatives. And they're expected to be able to, by the end of grade 5, generalize this formula. Volume is the area of the base times the height. So you've got the number of blocks in the area and then how many blocks, layers up there are. Okay. Now when you take a look at the grade 6, it goes from rectangular to, I'm just going to see if I can write this, triangular prism. Okay, so it's basically the same curriculum. I'm just showing you a slice of this. Is other things obviously in the curriculum, but using a variety of tools and strategies, decompose rectangular prisms into triangular prisms, and stacking congruent triangular layers of concrete material to form it, and trying to figure out the relationship between the height, area of the base, the volume of the triangular prism, and generalize the formula. Okay. So what we're going to see in the clips I'm going to show you are some students struggling with this transition from grade 5 math to grade 6 math. They've done, at the point we're going to see them, they've done the figuring out of a rectangular prism volume, and they've taken a look at, base times height, or length times width times height, that sort of thing, and they're now trying to figure out, they're asking the question on this day, how do we figure out a triangular prism? So to understand if a student was above grade level, you want to be taking a look at what else they might be able to do, which is to go beyond and decompose right prisms in general. Okay, so prisms that basically the face is at a right angle to the base, not ones that are on slant or anything like that. And again, it always shocks me when I go back to the curriculum to see how explicit it is about the manipulative, by stacking congruent layers, all those sorts of things, okay? So that's the curriculum behind what we're going to look at. And I just want to give you a minute just to refresh yourself. I don't know how many of you have been doing volume calculations lately, but I just wanted to give you a moment to take a look at this. And just, if you have your own piece of paper or just in your mind, you want to figure out, again, how would you figure out the volume of this rectangular prism, and then consider what might you do, what might students do to figure out if you split this into a triangular prism. What strategies might they use? How might they do it? Okay? So in your chat box, or if you want to write on this, you can, or just in your own piece of paper, just calculate the volume of this rectangular prism. See if you can come up with more than one way that students might do that. And then what might you do if this, for example, were split down here to be 2 triangular prisms? So you have a triangular prism that is, I'm going to try the pointer, that is here. That's the face, and then it goes back this way, and then there's another one here. Okay? So I'm going to give you a couple minutes just to think that through. Write any comments you want, write on the screen if you wish, and just get yourself ready for that kind of map. Is there anybody you'd rather use a microphone to explain what you think students might do at this level? Remember, they're grade 5, they're struggling with, how to do volume of a rectangular prism in general. And then by grade 6, they're probably reviewing how to do the rectangular prism. In this case, that's what they were doing. And then going on to splitting it or figuring out some way of doing the triangular prism. I like the comment here. I can see students maybe doing the calculation, as a 2 by 5 by 1. Yeah. In layers. the 2 halves at the end making 1 square. 2 by 5 by 1. Right, okay. So anybody else that has got any to put the formula in for 2 times 5 times 2 divided by 2, which is great, which is where we want them to end up to, but we don't want to give that to them in grade 6. We want them to be investigating and figuring that out. Okay, so I'm going to assume, can you show me with your checks or your crosses, if you're okay, you remember how to do the volume of a triangular prism, and he has given us the formula that probably a lot of us learned. We're going to see some students struggling with this, and before we go on to watch the video, I really want you to take a look at sort of the area of a triangle here. And one of the things that one of the students, before we come into the video, had talked about was the fact that a triangle can be half a square or half a rectangle, okay? And there's a couple of ways of visioning this. This particular image with the triangle going up the middle is what one of the students started off with when they started asking the question. And the students asked the question in this particular case. They are the ones who said, well, what would we do if it was a triangular prism? Because the teacher had a bunch of manipulatives there. They saw that after they'd done the rectangular prism. And in some of the video, the kids talk about folding the rectangle over. And what they're talking about is taking this one part of the triangle and folding it down to make half of the triangle, and folding the other half down to make the other half of the triangle, and they figured out that that would be half. I'm just going to go back a slide here. I think it's pretty obvious with this version that the triangles are half the area of the triangle. Here, in this version, which is the one the kids had, there was a little bit of debate as to whether that really the white parts were equal to the red part, and some of the kids were saying, well, if you had the volume of a rectangular prism, it would be, you'd have to divide it by 3 in order to get the volume of the triangular prism. So you're going to hear some of the kids talking about that. And I had just lost my, I don't know if you guys can hear me, I just lost my computer. There you go. Okay, I'm back. Could I get somebody to tell me if they could hear me in the chat box if I'm still on? My computer just went black. Okay, good, thank you. Okay, cutting it to compare the area, I've seen it. Yes, yeah. And so some of the kids came up with that idea. Other kids eventually came up with the idea of just, taking sorry, this is not going to be straight, but taking a line and then noticing that those two halves are equal, the white and the red pieces. On this one, Mr. Dawson, Ryan, who you're going to see in a moment, had a student take a look at this triangle. She was able to do it herself by the time she finished talking to him, and see that if you cut the line through, basically what you're seeing is the 2 small triangles on one side are equal and the 2 triangles on the other side. So it doesn't matter what triangle you make in a rectangle, it's always going to be half the square in area. So it's an important concept to understand before we go in to hear the students. So when we watch the clip, keep in mind the curriculum, and that developmental curriculum, continuum of concepts. And I want you to pay attention to what you see and hear in the clips. I've kind of done the same. And there are things that I take out of the videos, sort of my claims, but I'm interested in using these videos as sort of a prompt for discussion. The first video that we're going to watch is basically that you're going to see the teacher giving the background to the problem. And part of the video is me talking with Ryan Dawson with the beard, and Brad Clark, who doesn't have a beard. He's a grade 8 teacher. And it kind of came about that we were invited into Ryan's class because they had a really good discussion going. And because we've been working together on improving our teaching of math, he said, can you come in and can you bring the video camera? Let's take some pictures and see what's happening. And you're going to see at least one group talking, I think, in this clip. But I want you to focus on the way the teacher is interacting with his class and see if you see some things that sort of are kind of encouraging a dialogical classroom. So there's a lot of dialogue going on. Something he's doing to make sure the kids feel safe and comfortable in talking about things. And then I'd like to have your feedback after that. So Susan's going to put a link to this clip for me, and she's so quick. So math assessment, promoting dialogue is the first one. And for some reason, my computer is keeps getting kind of going into black, and I have to come back into it. But if you guys could use the link yourselves and open up a separate internet window, and you can watch it, that'll be easier than us playing it all at once. And when I'm going to clear the ticks, and when you're finished watching it, if you just put a green tick so I know you're done, and I'd be interested in getting your feedback to what you think about the clip. I'm just going to sign off for now. If anybody needs help, just write in the chat. Thanks, everybody, for your check marks coming in. While we're just waiting for everybody, again, what I'm looking for is your feedback about this clip in relation to setting up a classroom where kids are talking more about their math so that we can observe and listen to their conversations. If anybody feels more comfortable writing on the page, you're welcome to do that too. Thanks, Anik. Certainly that's something that I love the way Brad talks about it as, you know, the kids, he definitely says something about risk taking. And I think there's a lot of things that Ryan did when, even just in the short clips where we heard him talking and when he was reflecting on the session after we were finished, there were a lot of things that he was doing to encourage students to talk. And Tracy's hit it there. He's done a lot of work to build the confidence and make a safe environment. And, you know, I'm getting all emotional here hearing this because you know, we have worked really hard on it, and we've worked hard on doing this ourselves in our own professional learning group, building the trust between the three of us. We've worked together now in small groups, like or larger groups for 4 years pretty intensively, and it is important. And I think some of the things that I pinpointed in watching that he's specifically doing as a teacher is encouraging debate. Explicitly teaching ways for students to agree and disagree while respecting each other. And I don't know if I cut out the bit where he talks about that because I didn't have much time to edit, but yeah, accepting all ideas is it. And building on each other's thinking, and you know, there's another part of the clip where he talks about, you know, trying to make sure that his physical reaction to the kids' thinking doesn't influence their thinking. And I was very impressed when I saw him do that in the classroom because I didn't do it so well, and you'll see my videos later where I don't do it as well. Tracy, yes, it is. That's great. I'm thinking he's also doing it by, you know, having an understanding of that developmental continuum allows him to kind of target his questions, so he can see where the kids are, and he can know when to push a little deeper and when to let them go back and do the thinking or talk to another student themselves. I think the important point I'm seeing here, and your feedback is really welcome, if you can make student thinking audible, not just visible, but audible, so you can hear it, you can tailor your teaching to their needs, you can give them just-in-time support, you can encourage them in one direction or another, and there's one more important thing I'm going to come back to again, which is you learn yourself, and if you just listen and are patient and kind of can control your response and just let them keep going, you learn a lot more than if you get excited yourself about your own learning and start talking, which is what you'll see me do. I'll be a great non-example in one of the clips. So please do keep the feedback coming. I really would value any negative feedback too, like critical feedback, because you know, this is a research project we're involved in the moment, and it's happening now. And one of the things I'll be talking about at the end is where we're going to next, some of the next things. And if you have any suggestions, please feel free to add them and let me know. If you don't feel comfortable having your name attached to it, just write it on the page when you get to one. So I did have an extra feedback one. Kathy, Lisa, you have a question. Do you want to do it orally or do you want to do it written? Okay. So that question is coming in a moment. And while she's doing that, I just wanted to point out that, you know, a lot of you have identified some resources you use for getting really great questions. These are my 3 favorite. The one, yes, Susan says, don't be shy to use the mic. There's not that many of us, and I get tired of my own voice, so please do. But my Bible here is Making Math Meaningful to Canadian Students. I love that one. If you have a van der Waal or something like that in your school, it also gives you a really deep understanding of the curriculum, the continuum of concepts as you're teaching kids over the years, and what comes first and next in the building blocks. Lisa says, I know it's important to let the students explore their thinking and listen, but wondering if or when or how we intercept that thinking if it's going in the wrong direction. And I think that's a tough one. And I'm going to let you, let's come back to that after you've seen a couple of the other ones, because hubris comes before a fall, right? Excessive pride. And you know, I would have said, before watching myself interact with these students, I would have probably rated myself higher in my ability to know when to intercept. And I just want you to watch me now. Granted, I've been out of the classroom for a couple years teaching math, and these aren't my students, but I'm going to come back to that question. So please don't forget it, and maybe I'll ask you the question when we get to the last video. My favorite no might be a great addition to the class. I don't know what that is, my favorite no. Is that the routine? Is that, can you give me a little bit more information about that, what that is? That sounds great. Some of you mentioned Marion Small, the purple book that's on here, I find is an awesome book for questions too. Thank you for looking for the video link. Thank you. That would be great. It's just one that I really like.
I'm going to make a really quick interruption here and do another push for using the microphone. We do have a small group, and the talk button is up in the top left. The problem with typing questions is that there's a delay then, right, as we wait for the typing to happen. So don't be shy, and don't worry about turning on your mic when other people's mics are on. There can be multiple on at the same time, but we'll work that out just like we would if we were sitting around a table.
And I just want to, try and make this a safe environment for you to talk. I probably should have put the video clip of me, not facilitating conversation as well as I might. First, just to know, I'm not coming here as an expert, know-it-all that I can do everything perfectly. I've worked with an amazing group to come up with some principles that we think are really important in our teaching and what we're striving to do. So none of us needs to worry about, whatever. Just go for it if you feel up to it. I'd really appreciate it. I have this list of other things. Van der Waal, if you know Van der Waal, he's got a big book like Marion Small does, Making Math Meaningful to Canadian Students K-8 by Marion Small. They're like the Bibles that take you through the continuum of math development. You also get that same sort of thing in the front bit of the Guides to Effective Instruction. And I remember when I started using those, if you're a beginner teacher and you haven't done a lot, do go to those ones, and I started dipping into the problems first, and then I went back and read the front bit. But those are really nice, small, easy to use books that really get you started. They get you hooked into how to teach using some open-ended problems, give you a lot of extensions, show you what the math is behind the questions that you're doing. So those are great. And of course, using the curriculum are all great places to start for getting the kind of problems that are going to be rich in the understanding you need. You need two things. You need resources to give you really rich problems, and you need to be able to understand the math behind. And the Guides to Effective Instructions actually are on the internet. You can probably just Google Guides to Effective Instruction. Whenever I do that, there's language ones and math, and sometimes you get a hit on a board that has got all of them ready to go. They're also on EduGains, and I have a feeling that Susan is probably working on getting you a link to go in the chat room as we speak, so that should be there. And it'll also be on the OTF site after we're done, okay? So the second video I want to show you, I should explain that our school is 40% Mennonite. So the odd way that I'm filming with still clips and certain views of only certain students is because, we're respecting the rights of our Mennonite students in not wanting their images put on the internet. And there's other students as well who wouldn't want that. So when you see the videos go to a still clip, it's because I'm avoiding showing a student that shouldn't be on there. And so in this, I want you to take a look. This is a shorter clip, I believe, and what ways do you think teachers can interact with students to, it comes back to Lisa's question, to kind of push them in one direction or encourage them to think another way or just get them to think themselves. So Susan just put the second video clip in there. If you wouldn't mind taking a look at that, and I really, again, would like your feedback on this, if you wouldn't mind. Thank you. Okay, so most of you are coming back here. If you want your feedback to be anonymous, you feel free to use the text button and write on the feedback page, or you can write in the chat. But what are your feelings on that sort of interaction there? You heard, I'm hoping you heard that you saw at least one group of kids start in to have a discussion. We're going to see a few more interact with teachers in the last clip. One of the things that we've really tried to do is involve our students as researchers with us, and as basically giving us asking them for feedback on our practice. And that's been a really good way to push our teaching forward, because they're able to tell us what works and what doesn't. As soon as they take control over some of their learning, they get even more engaged. So we've used a few resources for learning how to ask questions. And there's a link that Susan's already put in, good questions for teaching, for math teaching. Oh, sorry, Susan, if you there. Yeah. Somebody has some piano in the background that's coming through. I think it's great because sometimes we forget we might be asking too many questions or not enough. Yeah, and I've really enjoyed. There's some good questions that give us sort of a way to start. The question we all used when we first started asking questions instead of telling kids things was, what are you thinking? And that was it. We had to bite our tongues as we went around to watch students working together and just say, can you explain what you're thinking? What might you do next? That sort of thing. These are my favorite 5 that are on this page, but one of these documents is, did I give you, yeah, good, I guess it's a good question for math. Now there's one that's, I put a link hopefully underneath there, Susan, on the slide, that is an EduGain literacy and numeracy one, asking effective questions. And these 5 questions are from that document, and right in the middle of the document, like it's just a short article, is this whole sort of table of questions to ask at the beginning, to get them to sort of reflect more, to encourage them to, write more of, yeah, thank you, that's it, to get them to write more of their thinking. And I found myself and the group that I was working with, we really had to work hard on retraining ourselves in how to talk to students in order to see their thinking and to hear and to be able to observe what they were doing. Thanks, Susan. You can also encourage students to do the things that we saw Ryan doing earlier, explain what they're thinking, agree with each other, getting a reason, disagree with a reason, build on from each other, et cetera, go beyond, use wait time. And there's an extra article in the bottom of that slide that you've just hopefully, yeah, there's a link to a poster I've put up based on the article that you've got there. It's at the bottom of this page. This is the link to my poster that I made up, and at the bottom of it there's also the link to the original document. But this we found and felt that this is a really good way to start getting kids to talk to each other in a way that really promoted good discussion. Okay, so there's some resources there to help you. And again, I really would like your feedback as to whether by the end of this, or even if you feel like it on the end feedback sheet that is anonymous as well from OTF, are these videos having an influence on you? Do you think they're effective for having, for assessment? Will they change your practice? Are the things that you find in the resources that are going to be helpful? This is the way I think of assessment, and the last video is there. It's basically the focus is on the 3 V's. Students need to be able to visualize, verbalize, and verify. This comes straight from a document that is the spatial reasoning document, and Susan's going to put the link for that in as well. Because we have a really high ELL population, we're taking a look at the visualize, verbalize, and verify from an ELL perspective in our next round of our inquiry. And actually the last in this series of math webinars that I'm doing with our ELL consultant, and I'm getting her feedback on these videos, and we're going to take a look at, okay, what can we now do to improve our practice for our ELL learners? And part of it comes back to this being able to visualize, verbalize, and verify. And our ELL students might need, and other students as well, might need some prompting to be able to verbalize. I've already gotten feedback from her, even just tonight, that it'd be really helpful to have some of the vocabulary on rings, like ring cards that you can just put on the table so that those kids have access to the vocabulary they need to be able to refer to, say, length, width, depth, whatever it is. Okay, so the last video, if you wouldn't mind taking a look, I'm going to clear the ticks and let me know when you've got to the end of that. This is the one where I'd like your feedback on, the way I'm interacting with students and whether I am, am I really facilitating the students' understanding? Am I helping them to verbalize their visualization? Am I helping them to verify what they know? Okay, you're not going to see the whole section, and I'm sorry, the blonde girl that you're going to see, she took me through her way of figuring out a rectangular prism or a triangular prism volume. She did it really well, and it made sense to her. I then challenged her to see it a different way, and you'll see the result of that and what happened. Then there's some girls in the background who meanwhile are creating a visual model of the way the blonde girl had done it in the first place really effectively. And I think that's about it. If you want to watch that video, and then give me a tick when you've seen it. Thanks. The people's ticks are coming back on. If you don't mind adding the comments, that would be great. I locked myself out again. There we go. Yeah, the IEP comment too is on 2 of the videos. Sorry about that. But we really are seeing, I remember when we first started doing this work and I really started listening to the students and trying to learn how they saw the math. I started realizing that my students who were on IEPs often had strategies that were very different from the way I would have done it traditionally. As I'm just trying to see who said it. Tracy said, we grew up with one way, one method, and I really strongly believe if the more I can listen to the students, the more I'm going to get an insight to the way they see things, and we're going to have, you know, much more diversity in the way of answering the questions. I'm very critical of myself in those videos because my feeling was when I rewatched the young boy's interaction with me that 2 things. One, instead of hands-off asking him questions, I reinterpreted what he said, which is not so bad, but I didn't let him finish, or I didn't pause to really absorb what he was trying to tell me. And I had a chance to go back today. I showed the kids all 3 videos today, at least their parts of them, and got their feedback, and I was able to say to him, look, you know, I really wish I had listened, because when I watched the video, I really heard what you were saying. And as Susan says, we have to be so careful to listen to the students and not impose our way of thinking or our words on them. And for us, we last year made the realization that we were doing that for our ELL students. We've gotten so habituated because it's one big group, 40% of our school, it's one culture that speaks their own language at home and has their own culture at home. We've become accustomed to the way they speak and fulfilling in what we think they're saying, which may be true, but may not be. So, you know, it's what we have to do with the math too. I'd like to go back again and work on a few things for my next round of improving my own teaching and understanding. Two things. One, to really work on the ELL component and trying to support those ELL students to be able to have the words, and to everyone, because it's going to be good for all, to explain really using academic language, not just social language, to explain their thinking. So that's number one. And number two, to really work, again, practicing those questions to ask the kids so I'm not directing them too much. I agree with Ashley. It is very difficult to get this kind of intense listening to students when there's only one of you and however many of them. So that's a real issue. I know that we use our co-teaching time whenever we can. When we have an inquiry, we build in some co-teaching time so we get a supply in to release one of us to go and work with the other. Don't underestimate, though, the use of a video camera. I've used that to get groups, record what groups are doing while I'm doing something as well. But I think, if you can set up the baseline for students learning how to do this themselves and trying to be facilitators themselves, it takes time, but you're going to get lots of discussion. It may not be as perfect as when, well, that wasn't perfect, the video clips I showed you, but as good, or the kids aren't going to be as on task as when there's 3 teachers in the room, but you can still build quite a bit of dialogue. I'm hoping the connection between what I've done. Yeah, go ahead, Lisa. Do you want to go ahead and talk? Sorry, Lisa, I don't know if anybody else is having trouble. Your audio is not coming through for me. Do you want to try one more time? Okay. Yeah, it's not coming through. I'm sorry, Lisa. If you can try writing it down. I know it'll take it longer. We're sorry we can't hear you. Thank you for being bold. I'm hoping the link between assessment and all this, oral language is becoming clear. I really felt going in, because I had an understanding of the continuum of the curriculum, I could say where the kids that I was talking to were in their understanding, and that's assessment. The next step then becomes, how do we document that, and how often, and does it need to be done, if you're with your same class and you know your kids really well, does it need to be done all the time? Is it enough just to have sort of a checklist of the things you're looking for that day and just check off the things that you're hearing? I've found that when I get to know the students and hear them speak, I get to recognize when they've done a paper and pencil assessment that that's not their total understanding. So I'll go back and, get them to explain it to me orally, or go back and watch them. And let's say that they get a C or a level 2 in their math that they do on paper. But when they're doing it orally, when they're doing it with manipulatives and building something and explaining it, they can get a level 3 or 4. Then I'm going to balance that mark between the different levels. I'm not going to give them the level 2 mark, because they can show me with what they say and what they are able to do that they are above a level 2 in their responses. And I think that's my main message for assessment. This is a document, the picture here of is paying attention to spatial reasoning, that talks about the 3 V's. And Susan has put math assessment. Oh, that's the videos, okay. And thank you, Anik, for the routine. I'm going to watch that when I'm done here. The main things that I've learned through doing this, I've added to my learning in preparing this webinar and watching the videos. In order to do accurate assessment of student thinking, and not just accurate assessment of student problem solving or student, paper and pencil tests, but their thinking is to know the curriculum above and below your grade, know the math, so be able to do it yourself and understand sort of at least some of the ways of doing it, be open-minded to what they're saying, and then for me in that last round, listen, ask questions, but let the student talk. And I felt myself getting so excited about the math and so excited that I thought I understood what they were doing that I took over, and I need to chill and just listen to them a little bit more in order to really understand. Understanding that, of course, the challenges of being one teacher in a classroom, you're not going to get around to everybody all the time, every day necessarily, but the more you work on developing the dialogical classroom, the more you're going to be able to get. So I wanted to come back to this idea of leveling and just let you read through these slides to see if you think that in watching the kids, would you be able to have assessed some of them according to this rubric? And do you mind giving me a check marking or an X in the side column, whether you think you'd be able to mark it just the same as a paper and pencil? Thanks, Lisa. I've got some people perhaps are still reading, but the question is, would you be able to use a rubric like this to assess the students' learning that you hear, that you saw when they were talking? Granted, you didn't see a whole section of them. I certainly felt that, you know, I was able to see some of the students give me, even if they were talking about the triangular prism, the boy in the blue that was talking about splitting it in half and putting it together to make a, I explained that what I thought he was making was a parallelogram prism, if that's what you call it. But if he had gone his way and I hadn't intervened, he still would have gotten the right answer, I think, because he would have still been thinking of it as a new sort of shape rather than comparing it to the triangular prism. So I think he would have gotten to the right answer. So he could potentially be a level 3. I'd have to watch more, hear more, see what he was doing to figure out where he was. There were some students that weren't, definitely I'm going to go back to level 2, they had the partial understanding. Some students who were, you know, just hadn't gotten to the point of being able to correctly talk through how to find the triangular prism, but they were getting there. And I think the communication part of it is coming in the lessons they've had since. They've been practicing it, and they've been working with, you know, easier or more difficult problems, just practicing going from one to the other and different ways of visualizing it as well. Are they getting there? I like that what you said, Lisa, that students working in pairs took away anxiety in front of the class, and I think Mr. Dawson, Ryan, has worked really hard on reducing the anxiety, and his strategy of sort of showing a similar response no matter what the answer was and being very encouraging has worked a lot in encouraging a lot of the students to speak. And the other kids have gotten used to not, you know, scoffing or anything, but being very respectful when they add on to somebody else's thoughts. I think one of the things we're pushing or that's just become natural to us now, is to engage the students as action researchers in helping us improve our teaching and giving us feedback in what's working for them or what's not, but also in their own learning and saying, you know, there's students that need this manipulative or need to see a net unfolded and then refolded in order to do surface area or whatever it happens to be. And I think the more you can engage them in finding solutions, for example, the group work or accountability, the more they're going to be able to solve the problems and actually discuss things, stay on task in groups, which is great. The self-assessment piece is also really important to know, is it working? Are they learning? We've found modeling our own mistakes and barriers to learning are a great spot to encourage learning. Lisa, Renette, you have a comment. Go ahead. I like Joanne's comment about metacognition being a beautiful exploration process. I love that. I think the more students can interact with nets, with manipulatives, the more their understanding is improved. And, you know, again, it's amazing to see how much is actually in the curriculum to use all those manipulatives. There's a sheet here that has a few other things that have been very influential for me. The last one, there's an article about reversing mass negativity with an attitude makeover. That started me on encouraging my students to give me feedback. Brené Brown has an excellent video about the power of vulnerability and being open and transparent, and that has really influenced my teaching. And the last one, there's an article that I actually wrote that talked about how I transformed my teaching a few years ago to try and get students to be giving me feedback on my practice and what effect that had. So basically, my biggest points were you have to know the curriculum and the concepts, develop that safe and accepting classroom where kids can talk, invite them to be co-researchers into their own learning and into my learning. And as a reflective practitioner, when you're transparent, you'll see vast improvements, I think, in student learning. I like that, Lisa, you said I agree that the use of manipulatives should be just a given, not seen as a part of an IEP. And yeah, that's what we discussed in our videos, that it should just be a given, that different kids need different things to answer the questions, and you shouldn't need to put that in an IEP at all. It shouldn't be an accommodation, and I certainly know in our board we're trying to get rid of accommodation IEPs when it's something that should just be part of everyday teaching like that. It's when it's not part of differentiated instruction, Lisa, or part of your regular practice that it ends up on an IEP. I like that. Wow, kids think of manipulatives only for kids who need help. Wow, you changed the view. That's powerful. Yeah. I think of, you know, I even think one of the things we discussed in watching the video is in the background of a couple of the videos, there were some kids that had things in their hands. And I was watching them while the teacher was talking, and they weren't talking to each other. They had some paper or whatever. And I happen to know that the teacher, Brian, who was talking, is a fidgeter as well, and he and Brad actually both need to keep moving whenever they're doing something. They have a hard time sitting still, and that's something that's totally acceptable in their classroom as well. Not just manipulatives for everybody, but, you know, the learning style of people, that they need to be doing something with their hands while they're actively listening necessarily. That's great. You sensed what in your... You sense in your classroom that people you see have an unhappy face, so you sense that kids saw the manipulatives that was only for kids who needed help. That's not good. Yeah. Well, I'm at the end. If anybody has any more questions, you've got my email there if you want to contact me. I know I tried to make this one a little bit slower and leave more space, but then if there's silence, I tend to fill it. So thank you all for your comments. And seriously, if you have any constructive feedback about the videos or anything you'd like to see, or any way you can see I could improve my practice as a facilitator or as a teacher in those clips, I'd love your feedback. So thank you so much. I love that, Joanne, too. It's like not sitting at a desk all day. You're welcome, Joanne.
Thank you, Kathy. I'm going to just come in for a couple of minutes before you all go away. Thanks so much, Kathy, for a really, really important session. You're modeling teacher as learner and showing us how your practice is continually changing, and I think that's such a great model for all of us as teachers. Tonight, I think there was a lot that we can take away from tonight's session, and certainly lots of great resources. Kathy has also created a couple of documents that were not shared as part of the session tonight. They were referred to, but they will be included in the resource package. So if you've taken an OTF Connect session before, you know that your feedback for sessions is very important, and the link is active right on the slide the first link, but it's also in the chat to the feedback survey, and you'll also get that by default when you close out of your Blackboard Collaborate room, and that's very important to OTF. It helps to drive their programming and their funding, so we would appreciate you doing that. Also, when you complete the survey, you have the opportunity to print, if you would like, and a certificate for yourself, and that's only active for 48 hours following the session, so recommended that you do that right away. There's also a resource link for a couple of you that are new to OTF Connects. By noon tomorrow, Amy in the OTF office will take all the links from tonight's session and the 2 resource pages that Kathy has created, and they'll be part of a resource page along with the link to this entire session. And also OTF calendar, you can look for future upcoming sessions. So I have a couple more things to say, but I'm just going to stop the recording and thank you all once again for a great evening.